now, Adam.
Hey, what's up, Sitch? What's the story for today?
So, big news. The Secretary of State of Maine has ruled that Trump is ineligible to be on the ballot for the primary coming this year.
Another ballot, huh? This started with
Yeah.
Colorado, and now look, we're at Maine. How many more states are going to do this?
Yes, exactly. That's the million-dollar question. So do you want to hear a short little video where she kind of explains her rationale for why she
Sure.
did this?
First of all, what's going on here? Look, I got a picture on the internet, and she looks
Uh-huh.
exactly like the aliens guy from the. What happened?
I'm not saying it's insurrection, but it's insurrection.
Okay. So hopefully she looks a little unserious in this picture. So hopefully
Right.
she sounds more serious when we see when we
Oh,
see a
yes.
clip of her, right?
Hopefully so. Wink, wink. Yeah.
Hopefully it's more serious. Let's check it
Yes.
out.
I qualified Donald Trump for the ballot, but under Maine law, any registered voter can bring a challenge. And that's in fact what happened. There were three challenges. One of those challenges was brought by two former Republican state senators and a former Democratic state senator. And I was required by the law to hold a hearing within 5 days and then to issue a decision. This is something that I did not choose to do, but that I was obligated to do under Maine law and the Constitution. This is not a criminal matter, and Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does not require a conviction. That definitely makes it a more complex and close question, as I acknowledged in my decision. It was not a close call on the question of whether January 6th, 2021 was an insurrection.
Oh my
Okay.
God. It was not a close call. Trump was totally doing it like an insurrection on January 6th.
It's so weird because okay, so she's the Secretary of State for Maine, and I looked it up and she was born in Massachusetts. I don't know why she's doing the upward inflection at the end of the sentences. That's like a West Coast like Valley Girl thing. So I have no clue where that came from.
Yeah, very, very distinct. I sensed Valley Girl is the moment I heard it, I was like, oh my God, it's my childhood.
That's unfortunate. That's really, listen, I don't want to add harm, okay? But ladies, it's really more of like a woman thing. I don't know if there's any guys that talk like that generally, but if that's an affliction that you're cursed with, you got to go to like a voice coach or something. You got to work that out. There's no way to undermine your credibility if that's your speech pattern, unfortunately. So.
Right, yeah. Okay. So what's a deep dive on this story? What's going
Okay,
on?
so well, I'll say right off the bat that even though she said this, she also said that they're not going to actually remove Trump from the ballot until the Supreme Court hears this case.
Okay, well that's good.
Right. So we talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to do this video to just kind of like flesh out my thoughts on it because my position on this, I feel like as usual, Adam, we're always in a very unique position. We always have very unique views about things. Okay.
Right, yes. That's why people come here for our unique
Yes.
views and for our Valley Girl accents.
There you go. That's true.
Oh, of course.
But because my position is that I do think that Trump did an insurrection. If you
Oh.
include, everything, the build up to it, like everyone focuses really on like the riot, which I get because that there's like an element of violence. But to me, it's really more of just the idea of trying to pressure Pence throughout the slate of electors so that the House could vote on it, and then to use the protests, even the protests hadn't gotten violent, but to use that as a mechanism to create some kind of pressure on Pence to do this action and not pressure on the House to vote the way it wants to vote. And to me, I think that's an insurrection or obviously an immoral action. But that aside, even though I think that,
Hold on just a second on this because I think it's
yeah,
important. So, I mean, I would describe it as subverting the electoral process through surreptitious means. And I think
right,
obviously there's enough evidence to prove that. But a lot of
yes,
people on the other side will say, well, what he was trying to do wasn't illegal. It was through the electoral process. It was through, this other kind of side way of doing it. This idea that Pence would throw out the electoral college and it would be thrust into the Congress, the state legislatures would vote. That's still going to be a democratic process. Legally, what he did was fine. I mean, I don't subscribe to any of that stuff. I'm just,
Right.
voicing what the opposition will probably say to
Hmm.
this, insurrection argument. Like, we understand that argument. I would say that
Yeah.
argument
Yeah.
is really, I mean, if it played out that way, if Pence did throw out the vote, if it did go into the Congress and the state legislatures voted and they voted Trump president for a second term, it's hard for me to imagine that the country would just go on like that didn't just happen.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
If the Supreme Court affirmed it or something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard for me. Yeah. Go ahead.
Especially after him putting three Supreme Court justices on, it would
Yeah,
look really
straight in a
bad.
row. That's a great point
Yeah.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Well, I'm glad you
yes.
brought that up because it actually has a lot to do with my position on this. Um, which is the people that were kind of making the argument of that, like, well, it's not exactly clear in the law whether Pence could do that. It's someone trying to do a major thing where they have a major impact on elections based on a weird, well, actually, technicality loophole that maybe or maybe doesn't exist in the law. But I think we would all understand, and I've never heard anyone argue this, even if you think that that loophole exists in the law where Pence could do that action, no one thinks that that was the intention or the spirit of the law for the vice president to be able to just do that, to just throw out votes, based on nothing really. But,
Right.
no one
Yes.
thinks that was like the spirit of the intention of the law. They're just trying to win on like a technicality or in a loophole. And my position in these political conflicts is even if such a loophole or technicality exists, if it violates the spirit of the law, I don't think it's the action you should take. And so that's what I was going to say is that even though I do believe that Trump did a subversion of democracy or insurrection, whatever you want to call it, even though I believe that, I also don't believe it's justified for Colorado or Maine or any of the other states to take him off the ballot because it feels like the same thing. It
It
feels like
is.
they're looking at the law and they're saying, oh, there may be some weird loophole or some technicality here. Let me exploit that to do this weird mechanism that to me clearly seems like it violates the spirit and the intention of the law when it was created.
Yeah, we're getting into kind of tit for tat political games here that is just not a sustainable path. So, I mean, I agree with exactly what you're saying. They're looking for a technicality to deal with something that they're terrified of, that Trump will be president again.
Right. Because the law, like, the 13, 14, and 15 Amendment were all passed in relation to the Civil War and after the Civil War. And so when in the law it says that, a person can't be president if they, aided or abetted in a rebellion. Well, I'll talk about the oath thing in a second, but assuming it says someone can't be president if they did an insurrection or rebellion, it doesn't, that law provides no mechanism to determine what an insurrection is or who did an insurrection. And the reason for that is because most laws, when they're passed in relation to some specific thing. And so obviously, this was passed in relation to the Civil War. It wasn't really a contentious question or a convoluted question who participated in the Civil War. It was pretty straightforward. And so that's why the law is written that way. Um, but so now in 2023, hundreds of years later, we don't have that situation. We have a situation where, well, did Trump do an insurrection? I mean, I personally think yes, but that hasn't really been adjudicated by a court, a federal court case at all. It's a
Right.
federal crime. It's a criminal crime. He hasn't even been charged with that. That's not even what the January 6th charges is for defrauding the voters and violating their civil rights. It's not even for doing an insurrection. And so to me, intuitively, and people can make legal arguments here, but intuitively it seems bizarre and wrong that a state court would make a determination on its own through a non-criminal process without giving a person, the normal criminal due process that one would be afforded to just make a declaration that they did this federal crime.
Yeah, it's a mess. So every single state is going to separately adjudicate whether or not Trump is an insurrectionist. I mean, obviously that's not going to happen because the Supreme Court is going to take it up. So,
Yeah, but
But
that's another thing. Because
yeah,
yeah, is every state's going to make their own determination? How's that going to work?
yeah, that's ridiculous. We no longer are a land of law. It's like, look, you're
Right.
guilty of an insurrection in this state, but not in this state.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
but it's weird because again, like I feel like most people I hear talking about this, it's like if they think Trump did an insurrection, they're on board with this. If they think he didn't, they're against it.
Oh, of
Right.
course. Yeah.
I don't feel like I hear a lot of people arguing from a clear line of like just like the to me, and maybe this is why I'm like the lawful good paladin here. I think that the process often matters. Upholding the process can often matter, not always, but often matter more than whatever the outcome is, because the process and the fact that people are following the process is kind of the only thing that maintains order in our society and allows the peaceful transition of power anyway. And that's why I thought what Trump was doing by subverting the process was so bad, because he's subverting the process. But this feels like the same thing. It feels like subverting the process in a way that will just cause a lot of damage to the system going forward because like like if say theoretically the Supreme Court upheld this, it's like okay, so all the red states are going to try to throw Biden off for some kind of insurrection charge because this they can just get some conservative judge somewhere to make the determination. Like how are we going to have elections going forward in the future?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up because I always call it procedural fairness. And so much of our institutions, so many of our institutions rest on this idea of procedural fairness. This is why people buy in. They think, okay, well, the outcome might have not have been what I wanted, but the procedure was fair.
Right,
And
exactly. Yeah.
and this is what was so damaging about what Trump did because, and like I said, I'm glad I laid it out at the beginning of the video because what he tried to do just threw procedural fairness completely out the window. It's like,
Yeah.
so, but I understand that he had this notion that procedural fairness had been thrown out with him, that there was some sort of fraudulent stuff going on. I don't know that any of that has been proven in any way, shape, or form. So,
Right, but you have to use the procedure to adjudicate that, and if you lose, then you lose, and
yeah,
that's
exactly.
it. Those are the rules
Exactly.
of the
Yeah.
game. Yeah.
So we're trying to get back on that procedural fairness track here. And this is a huge side quest. I mean,
Yeah,
away from it.
it's so not worth it because this is what's annoying. It's like a lot of people, a lot of local politicians, they're obviously incentivized, and a lot of judges can be incentivized for their own, like their behaviors incentivized for either ideological purposes or their own power purposes. Like, I don't know what the
Yes.
Secretary of State in Maine, maybe it's really within her benefit to help her own, secure power in Maine to do this action. Because the thing that's like from a national perspective, this is obviously such a stupid move because all it does is it allows Trump to say, I'm the victim. They're out to get me. Look at this thing that seems so unfair to most people. Which even if people don't understand like the complicated legal questions here, which most people don't, it intuitively seems like it doesn't make sense. And then it's all going to be for nothing because like no one thinks the Supreme Court's not going to overturn this. Nobody thinks the Supreme Court, which is 6-3 conservative, three of whom Donald Trump put there himself, nobody thinks the Supreme Court's going to uphold this.
Right.
So it's all just
Yeah.
for nothing.
Well, I wonder how many of these people's constituents are calling them up and saying, "Look, if you don't keep them off the ballot, we're not going to vote for you in the next election." I mean,
Right.
they do have those kinds of pressures on them as well. So I agree with you that the Supreme Court, everyone is saying that the Supreme Court is going to overturn these, but it is a huge chance for them to grab the limelight for a bit and probably come off as the heroes to their constituents and be able to campaign in the next election about how the conservative Supreme Court totally screwed them.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like I would since I don't think that this legally makes sense at all, I would hope that the Supreme Court rules like 9-0, but I don't know, it might be along partisan lines. Another thing that I haven't really
Ooh,
heard a lot of people
that's
bring up,
something I
which
didn't
is,
think about.
yeah,
Uh-oh.
another thing that's interesting that I haven't heard anyone really bring up is that, when Trump was trying to retain power, he had the whole controversy where after Bill Barr resigned, someone in the Attorney General's office wrote this letter falsely claiming that the federal government had evidence of voter fraud, but then making this argument to the states legislatures that under federal law, state legislatures could basically do anything they want when it comes to electing the president. So therefore, they should throw out the votes and just say Trump won, essentially. And Trump wanted this letter sent by the Attorney General to all the various states that were having these contentious, issues. And then the Attorney General said that he wasn't going to do it, and Trump fired him, and then put the guy in place who was going to send out the letter. But then like there's this whole convoluted argumentation where there was the threat that everyone in the Attorney General's office would quit. So Trump eventually unfired the guy, and they never sent the letter out. Blah 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 blah. But that legal argument, I'm curious because that legal argument has not been brought up in this context. Because if that legal argument is true, that Trump made, that state legislatures could do whatever they want, then technically couldn't state legislatures just not put certain people on the ballot then?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, was that letter going to be sent out to the Maine Secretary of State? Is that the person that is supposed to receive those letters?
I don't know. I guess it could be sent to them or be sent to the governor and the state legislatures because it would be state legislatures that would have to make the determination.
Sure,
With
of
Trump.
course, they're in charge of
Right.
the elections.
Right. So
Yeah,
I don't know. So it's interesting that no
interesting.
one's because I thought that argument's a very dangerous argument at the time that Trump was making it. Though interestingly, here it could be used against him. Though I haven't really heard any of the people on the
Oh,
left
this is
make that
such a
argument.
mess.
But there's another interesting thing too, is that so in California, so in California they have decided not to do this. They're not going to throw Trump off the ballot, and
Yep,
Newsom himself has specifically said he thinks it's the wrong move to do.
right, because he's running for president.
Is that, well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is that the move? Because he knows it will help Trump if that happens.
Of course, he wants to run against Trump. What are you talking about? He's like, why are you going to take the guy out that I can beat, that I can just completely destroy when Biden puts me in the ring?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's that, if it's more just that he doesn't want to run against Trump, and then Trump will say like, you're such a phony governor. Your state tried to remove me from the ballot because you don't like democracy. You were just put in by a bunch of super delegates by the DNC, so you don't like democracy. Like blah 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 blah.
That too, that too.
Yeah.
Look, I think he thinks he has the best chance of beating Trump. I think a lot of people think that. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
I don't look, I've heard, and I don't know if what you've read on this, but my theory and what I brought up on the live stream is that, Biden, they've made some sort of pact with Biden that if they get to the general election and he's polling double digits below Trump, that he'll step aside and let someone else take over. Probably Gavin Newsom. I'm not sure about that anymore. People are reporting, insiders are reporting that Biden is like completely delusional, that he thinks he's the only one that can beat Trump, and he's like not having any of this talk about how he's doing bad in the polls and stuff. So he's
Hmm.
like kind of completely unmoored from reality from the stuff I'm reading.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it might be too late if he's already been selected by the DNC. I don't know how that works at that point. Because I mean, what you could have, I would imagine, is because the Democrats have super delegates, that you could just have Biden drops out whenever the super delegates cast their vote, and the super delegates just declare whoever they want, like Newsom or somebody, to be the presidential nominee. I don't know if after that process how that works, but I had thought for a long time that that was going to be the plan, but as we get closer to that and they're not really talking about it, and it starts to look to me be worse and worse and worse to sneak Newsom in at the last second to do that, I start to think that you're correct, that that's not the plan, that maybe that's Newsom's plan, but that's not Biden's plan, and that
It's
Biden
not.
is just either Biden himself is delusional, or the people around him just want their own power for themselves because Biden is like a husk at this point, and that he's just not, that there is no plan to really switch him out, and they're literally just going to try to weaken and Bernie's him through this election, which is insanely shocking to me, that that's happening.
Aren't people going to see the guy standing next to him in the debate against Trump, with his hand up his back?
No, like
Isn't
listen, they'll
that going to
have
make it obvious?
no, 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 no. Listen, you'll see. You'll have Biden will be standing like at the podium, and the curtain is like right behind Biden's back, and so you can't see that there's like a person with like a wooden stick holding Biden up, from behind the curtain, right?
Yes.
So,
Ben
but
Shapiro's been saying that Biden is not going to do a debate, which I cannot fathom.
I don't if
Yeah.
he doesn't, I think they lose. I mean, it's possible that they won't. Like if Biden is so infirmed that he can't do debate, which would be the only reason he wouldn't, and would be why everyone would assume he doesn't if he doesn't. Um, then I think it's over at that point. Everyone's gonna say what like it's gonna be such a clear indication that he's not physically capable for running for president.
Yeah, I can't imagine. That's just like a complete giveaway. If you're saying, look, I can't do a debate. I mean, whatever excuse you concoct is going to come off looking
There's no excuse.
bad. Yeah,
There's zero
exactly.
excuses. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Everyone will just know it. Everyone will just know it's because he's too sickly, and Trump will say it again and again and again, and it will completely depress voter turnout for Biden. And I mean, I think you're right. I think there's, the Biden camp is just delusional, and there's this insane idea that only I can beat Donald Trump. That's like, okay, oh, Grandpa, go to sleep now. Like,
Right. Yeah. So any final thoughts while we wrap up?
that's it.
Hi, you just listened to a Sitch and Adam recorded video. That's right, we're doing Monday through Friday deep dive recorded videos now. And of course, we're still doing our live streams. Our live streams are on Sunday and Tuesday starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And you can super chat us, or you can join the channel. Subscribe to this channel right here to watch the live show or watch more of our awesome deep dive videos.